Don't mind me. I'm just drinking hot tea from my Steve Wilkos mug. Steve Wilkos, American media legend. For tickets to the show, call 877-747-8383. What I want to talk about today might seem like sort of a depressing thing at first, but stick with me because I do think that this is the path to ultimate liberation. I was watching the Elon Musk Neuralink demo a couple days ago, and if you haven't seen that or don't know what it is, basically Neuralink is a company that Elon Musk is involved with. They're developing this little chip thing that can basically replace a piece of your skull, have wires that can plug into the neurons of your brain. It can send signals to your brain, you can send signals back to it, and basically it's the first kind of real like consumer grade brain computer interface. I've been interested in like futurist technology stuff for a very long time. I'm like, one of those nerds that actually has been to the Singularity Summit multiple times. So I'm like aware of what a lot of these futurists predict, that artificial general intelligence is going to emerge within our lifetime, and that, potentially we're going to merge with computers and all of that kind of stuff, which is like too much to talk about in this video. But lately, with both GPT-3, which again, too much to talk about in this video, and Neuralink, it's kind of like, the stuff that I was like reading about and hearing about back in like 2008, 9, 10 is starting to, like, back then it was just like, oh, this is a cool thing that I'm like, people are saying is coming, but like it felt more like, fantasizing. I'm starting to see that this stuff is really coming in our lifetime. We live in like a super weird time. I mean, you can turn on the TV and like we have a plague right now and political upheaval and all this stuff, and so it's not like a surprising thing to say that we live in a weird time, but I think it's actually like weirder than people realize, like how far removed we are from what most human life has been like, especially, basically because of technology. A lot of things are being heightened that are normally like, take pornography, for example. Like maybe you're like a, primitive tribal man. How many naked women would you really see in your life? If you were very, very charismatic, maybe, I don't know, let's say a couple dozen. Now you can see a couple dozen naked women or men or whatever you're into in like a second. So, everything has just become like accelerated and heightened. And I think that we just are not going to have a legacy. We are not going to be remembered. And, people, this is not something that's like entirely new. Everyone knows that like you die and then, what's the like, is like some Native American saying, there's two deaths. There's the death when you die, and then there's the death when the last person who remembers you dies. There are famous writers and musicians and painters and scientists and people who dined with kings and were just like incredibly famous in their lifetime who 100 years later no one knows about. But bringing it all back to technological innovations, like accelerating these things that happen anyway in life, I'm basically starting to realize that as we either merge with machines or develop artificial intelligence that is beyond human level, like what we do in this life, what creations we make, we are actually going to in some way see a death in this own lifetime. And what I mean specifically is like whatever you as an artist are making, whatever you as a writer are writing is going to be good while there are no machines making stuff. But once artificial intelligence figures out how to be creative, which it will inevitably do, the best book, the best movie, the best video game, the best painting, the best song that humans have written is going to seem mediocre compared to what computers are producing. And obviously that's like exciting for the people who are like consuming stuff, but like for people, if you're creating stuff, that's kind of like a scary thing to think that within your own lifetime you're going to be made irrelevant. And maybe it's not even just for like creator, because like everyone is honestly kind of like having an impact on the world and putting stuff out there, but like our impact is really going to be forgotten. Our legacy is not going to is not going to last, because it's just not going to be good compared to the things that computers are doing. If anything, it will be in some like museum of boring things humans used to make. Like, isn't that a cute little, like, like you see like a little, like Aztec, just like crumpled little clay put together, and you're just like, oh wow, like what primitive things they were doing. So that is maybe sounds bleak, but what I actually think is that this is liberating if you look at it in the right way. Doing things for some future accomplishment, some future legacy, is a recipe for unhappiness. My generation, we grew up with just an overload of like biopics and documentaries that it makes it seem like the struggle is worth it in the end. There is someday, you're gonna struggle in obscurity, or your life is gonna be pain. That's the bigger point, that your life is gonna be pain for many, many years, but then you're gonna accomplish that thing, and it won't even be noticed when it happens. But later, Martin Scorsese is gonna direct a documentary about your life, and it's gonna be, oh, they'll see. And I think that ultimately tricks people into pursuing a path that isn't like congruent with who they are and what they want and what will ultimately make them happy. We are the last generation of humans. I don't mean like, millennials or Gen Z or whatever thing. Just this cluster of humans on Earth. I think it's important to like ground yourself and remember that actually when you stop pursuing these like far away goals, this accomplishment 30 years from now, this like beautiful resume, this Wikipedia article, this documentary that's been made about you really like tap into the present moment and realize that like, okay, you can here's my point. It doesn't have to be nihilistic. I think that actually to think that the satisfaction that if you're not going to get satisfaction at a future date, then nihilism is the only choice, because like who gives a f***, why care about anything? I think that's actually an incorrect way of thinking about things, because once you stop like living for some future day, some future accomplishment, you start to realize that like everything that you do is an act of beauty and expression. Like talking with a friend can be a beautiful act of expression done for its own sake. For a long time, I kind of struggled with like, what is the point of art? I was like looking for there to be some kind of like study you could point to. This is when I was younger. I'm thankfully I'm over this now. But like to pursue a path in science is like very clear. Like you might develop some technology that then lets humans build a rocket that then puts humans on Mars or whatever, But like what I actually realized is art is almost by definition something which does not matter. It is purely an expression for the sake of expression. And then you start to realize that exists every day, in every moment. Back before we had the printing press, back before we had any of this technology where you could record stuff, I think that's how people lived. In a way, I feel like Twitter and Instagram and YouTube has kind of like reverted us to like, even though that stuff is stored, there's so much content coming out. There's like on YouTube, I think there's 80 years of content coming out every day, to where it's really like insane to think that in 50 years someone will ever be able to find your video. That's how it was back before we were recording stuff. You would make a painting on a wall just because you wanted to like show your friends that painting, and then they saw it and like, then the barbarians invaded and they burned the wall down, and so your civilization was lost forever. Once you start thinking that way, like I get way more writer's block, more like creative block, when I start thinking about what I should do, what would be good for my career, what would be the right thing to do. But when I start to just think, what is making me laugh right now, or what is interesting to me to do right now, I end up being so productive. I know that people are out there like who want to be making stuff, who want to be putting stuff out, but are thinking, oh, I don't know, how does this thing reflect on me? No one cares. No one cares. Do what you want. Do what's interesting to you. You will be forgotten. The work you create will be forgotten. So have fun. Enjoy it. If you are struggling to make stuff, if you feel like you've got stuff twirling around in your head, whether it's a super small thing, a super big thing, stop being so attached to like what this is going to, like how it's going to represent you to the world, how you're going to be remembered. Am I this type of person that does, this type of video? Oh, that video doesn't reflect like well on me. Dude, no one cares. Go out, do it anyway. Have fun, be free. You will have no legacy. You will be forgotten. Just like my boy Steve Wilkos.
You know what you're supposed to do? Work, get food for your children, pick up the dog crap off the floor. You had a job. You were working 16 hours. You were making plenty enough money to have a clean place. You're a capable young man. You could bend over. I see you have 2 hands attached at the end of your arms. You'll let your kids crawl around in dog crap because what, you're afraid to pick it up with your bare hands? Are you telling me that's the reason why? You didn't want to get dirty?